was a cold, rainy evening when an older man stepped into a bustling restaurant, his shoulders hunched beneath a threadbare hoodie, his hands trembling not just from the chill but from the weight of thoughts that had been tormenting him for weeks. He quietly ordered a modest dinner and took a seat by the window, the kind of spot where you could sit alone and think without being noticed. As he brought the first sip of coffee to his lips, it wasn't warmth he received from the place. Instead, it was a scornful glare and the sharp sting of mockery from a young waitress. She rolled her eyes as she disappeared into the kitchen, her voice carrying loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Another broke old man taking up space, probably won't even leave a real tip. What she didn't know, what no one in that restaurant knew, was that this wasn't just any customer. This was Javier Morales, the very man who had built this restaurant empire from nothing but grit, faith, and calloused hands. He wasn't just the founder of Cajun Soul. He was its heartbeat. And tonight, he hadn't come here for the food. He had come seeking answers. 30 years ago, Javier was just another immigrant from Honduras, arriving in Louisiana with barely more than a suitcase and a dream. His English was broken, his hands were worn from hard labor, but he carried something priceless, his late mother Maria's gumbo recipe, and a relentless determination to make something out of nothing. With a battered fryer, a second-hand griddle, and a stained recipe card, he opened a tiny 10-seat roadside diner in Baton Rouge. He named it Cajun Soul not just because of the flavors it offered, but because he believed food was meant to do more than satisfy hunger. It was meant to nourish dignity, restore broken spirits, and bring people together. To Javier, that little diner wasn't a business. It was a promise. A promise to his mother that no one, no matter their job, their pocket change, or their worst day, would ever be made to feel small within its walls. Every customer would leave not just fed, but seen, respected, and whole. That promise didn't just build a diner. It built a legacy. From that humble beginning, Cajun Soul expanded into a beloved chain with over 140 locations across the South. Known for its overflowing plates, $5.00 meatloaf specials, and servers who called every guest by name because they meant it, Cajun Soul wasn't just a place to eat. It was a place that felt like home. For decades, that soul thrived. But lately, something had shifted. Javier began receiving anonymous letters, dozens. A dishwasher said he'd been berated in Spanish by a night manager. A single mother wrote about being humiliated by a server after tipping what little she could afford. A loyal regular claimed the food no longer tasted like it was made with love, just thrown together without care. Each letter sliced deeper than the last. Cajun Soul wasn't just a business to him. It was the American dream, one he had built with blood, sweats, and long, sleepless nights. And when that dream started to rot from the inside, he knew spreadsheets and memos weren't going to fix it. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes. So he stripped away everything that shouted success, left his polished Rolex behind, and strapped on a $15.00 Casio. No designer suit, just a faded hoodie, wrinkled sweatpants, and worn sneakers with soles peeling away. He became invisible by design. On a rainy Thursday night, he walked into Maria's Place, the busiest Cajun Soul restaurant in Atlanta, named after the woman who had inspired it all. Her photo still hung on every wall, but tonight no one recognized him. Not the hostess glued to her phone, not the waitress who scoffed at his presence, and certainly not the kitchen staff, whose laughter carried a kind of coldness that didn't belong in a place born of love. Javier chose a booth in the far corner, his booth, the one he had sat in 20 years ago during the grand opening, hand-rolling silverware with his very first employees. He ran his hand gently along the edge of the table. The scratches were still there, the wood still familiar, but the spirit of the place felt different now, colder, emptier, as if somewhere along the way the soul of Cajun Soul had gone missing. and Javier Morales had come to find it. He reached out and gently touched the table. The same old scratches were still there, but the warmth, the soul it once held, was gone. His heart ached, not from changes in lighting or decor. The scent of melting butter, roasted garlic, and sweet cornbread still lingered in the air, but the feeling cut deep. No one smiled, no one greeted anyone, no one looked each other in the eye. What once was a haven now felt cold, like a factory line churning out food. A place once named after his mother with pride had become a lifeless machine with her face on the wall and no trace of her spirit in the room. And then she appeared. And in late 20s, dark circles under her eyes from endless double shifts, but her stare was anything but tired. It was sharp, guarded and hardened like armor forged from cynicism. She strutted toward Javier's table as if marching onto a battlefield, arms crossed, chewing gum like it owed her money. No greeting, not even a glance. "What do you want?" she snapped, her voice cold and clipped. "And just so you know, we don't split checks under $30, we don't do substitutions, and no, we don't have oat milk." Javier looked up at her, his eyes soft and calm like the golden glow of an autumn afternoon. He nodded politely, trying to melt the ice between them with patience, the same patience that had once defined this place. "Good evening," he said gently. "Could I please have the fried chicken plate and a sweet tea, if that's all right?" Shannon let out a sarcastic snort. "Oh, sure, Your Majesty. Want it on a gold plate? Maybe throw in a back rub, too?" Javier offered a faint smile. It was small, weary, but held his dignity like a man refusing to surrender. "No, thank you. That'll be all." She rolled her eyes and spun on her heel, muttering loud enough for the next table to hear. "Cheap orders. Broke energy. Bet he leaves me a pile of pennies and a self-help quote." A group of teenagers at the nearby table burst into laughter, and Javier heard every word. Each syllable felt like a blade to his chest. He wanted to speak up, wanted to tell her that this exact table was where he had trained the restaurant's very first team, that this place once served single mothers for free every Sunday, that the chair she was leaning on had been built by him and his cousin using salvaged wood from the wreckage of a storm. But he said nothing, because tonight he wasn't the boss. He was just an old man in a worn-out hoodie, trying to swallow his pride with a glass of sweet tea that hadn't even arrived yet. And deep down, he felt it. His mother's gaze from the photo on the wall. Silent, stern, and filled with disappointment. Just as Javier started to rise, planning to leave quietly like any other nameless guest, a voice exploded from the kitchen. "Wage of fire, Luis." It was Miguel, the young line cook who had been mocked by Shannon for sharing his tips. His voice tore through the air like thunder cracking the ceiling. Every diner in the room turned toward the kitchen doors, now swinging in silence. "He just gave one plate of food to a homeless mother and her child last week. You praised him for it," Miguel shouted, his voice cracking. "And now you fire him." "Because I run a restaurant, not a charity," Rick, the night manager, bellowed as he stormed toward the kitchen pass-through. His face was flushed, burning with fury. Luis went soft, handing out free meals like he's Mother Teresa. "I don't need heroes in my kitchen. I need people who follow the rules." And in that moment, something inside Javier stirred, something deep and long buried. But it wasn't anger. It was the ache of a father watching his child be punished for doing what's right. It was the sudden awakening of a purpose he had left dormant for far too long. He rose, slowly, deliberately, steady as stone. His heartbeat thundered like ceremonial drums echoing in a sacred hall. He took off his cap, then his worn-out hoodie, revealing silver-streaked hair and a face weathered by decades of sacrifice, resilience, and hard-won wisdom. No longer did he look like a frail old man. No, what stood before them now was a man walking into the light, returning to the place that once carried his faith. Javier walked straight into the center of the restaurant, his eyes locked onto Rick's, not with rage, not with fear, but with the steady fire of someone who had lost everything before and built it back with his bare hands. Chen instinctively took a step back, confused and uneasy. "Sir, you can't be back here. This area's for staff only." Rick turned around, chest puffed out like a rooster ready to fight. "You think this is some kind of joke? Sit down, old man, or I'll have security throw you out." Javier said nothing. He simply reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a small, weathered leather wallet. With one calm motion, he flipped it open. Under the soft overhead lights, a glint of metal caught every eye, and 3 words etched into polished brass seemed to suck all the air from the room. Javier Morales, founder and CEO. The silence that followed felt like a bomb had just gone off in a cathedral. Forks dropped, a glass shattered in the corner. Shannon's face turned ghostly pale, as if she were staring down a ghost from her past. Rick stumbled back a step, mouth agape, completely speechless. You him?" Javier didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone was low, steady, like the rumble of distant thunder on a still night. It carried pain, disappointment, and the echoes of promises broken within those very walls. 30 years ago, he began, his gaze sweeping across the stunned room. "I opened my first restaurant with my mother's recipe and a $500 0-cent loan. I scrubbed every table, burned my hands on fryers, and slept in the back when I couldn't afford rent." He paused, drawing a deep breath to calm the storm brewing inside him. His eyes drifted across the room, servers frozen in shame, cooks blinking back tears, customers whispering in awe as if they were witnessing something sacred. "I named this place Maria's Place because my mother once taught me that cooking was never just about making money. It was about giving love, not through greed, not through humiliation, and certainly not through cold indifference." Now, Javier turned to Rick, his eyes sharp as a blade but heavy with pain. "But tonight, I saw my mother's name dragged through grease and gossip. I saw a man fired for showing compassion. I saw tips being stolen, dignity being crushed, and a culture that's become poisoned." Shannon could barely stay on her feet. Her lips trembled, tears streamed down her face. I didn't know. I was just a—" "You knew," Javier said softly, yet with unwavering firmness, like a truth that couldn't be denied. "And so did he." He glanced toward Rick. "You both forgot what this place was built for. You saw uniforms instead of people. You saw struggling customers as burdens. You saw honest workers as threats." The kitchen door creaked open once again. A familiar figure stepped out, eyes red and glassy, voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Morales." Javier turned. "Luis? I never meant to cause trouble, I just—" "You did nothing wrong," Javier said, his voice softening for the first time that night. "You're hired back, effective immediately, and your pay is going up." Luis broke down, covering his face with both hands as Miguel rushed over to hug him tight. No one said a word. A few staff lowered their heads, not out of fear, but from shame. Javier looked around the room one final time. "I don't care about profit if it costs us our soul. If you're only here for a paycheck, then leave. But if you want to be part of something real, something that feeds more than just hunger, then be here tomorrow morning, 7:00, clock sharp. We start over." And with that, he turned around and walked out the front door, leaving behind a restaurant that had just tasted the bitter truth and now stood at the edge of redemption. The next morning, before the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, a line had already formed outside Cajun Soul. Familiar faces stood in the misty morning air, some in wrinkled uniforms, some clutching notebooks, others silent with hands deep in their apron pockets like they were holding on to the last thread of hope. No one spoke. They just waited. At exactly 7:00 a.m., the door opened. There was no badge, no CEO speech, just Javier, wearing a crisp white apron over an old denim shirt, sleeves rolled up like it was day one. He smiled. "Come in," he said quietly. "Let's begin again." And they entered. Not the same people who had scoffed, mocked, or ignored the heart of the place. These were people carrying guilt, humility, and the fragile spark of something new. Javier didn't start with rules. He started with a story. "My mom taught me how to fry chicken before I learned how to drive," he began. "But what she really taught me was this. When someone walks through that door, rich or poor, for 10 minutes or an hour, they're ours. It's our job to care for them, to listen, to serve them with soul. Because this place isn't about food. It's about respect." A thick silence hung in the room. Then, slowly, a hand rose. It was Miguel. Face. "Mr. Morales, are we really doing this? Starting over? For real?" Javier nodded. "Not just here. Every location. New training, new leadership, and one rule above all else. Kindness is mandatory." He turned toward the back of the kitchen, where Rick had once ruled like a tyrant. But standing there now was a different man, Luis. His face still blotchy from tears, but clean-shaven and proud, in a fresh manager's apron. "You earned this," Javier said. "Lead with heart." Luis looked like he might collapse from gratitude. Janin stepped forward next. Her voice was shaky, her eyes still red. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I was bitter, rude. I treated people like they didn't matter. I forgot what this place stood for." Javier opened his arms. "Then start over," he said. "If you're willing to change, there will always be a place for you at this table." She nodded and wiped her eyes. "Thank you." Weeks passed, and word spread fast. Customers who had long stopped coming returned, not just for the food, but for how it made them feel. Smiles replaced sighs, tips went up. Even the kitchen sounded different, laughter now dancing alongside the crackle of hot oil. Javier visited every location. He shook every manager's hand. And one day, when a customer came up a few dollars short for her meal, Shannon quietly paid the rest without a second thought. She didn't need a rule book anymore. She had found her soul again. And in the end, so did Cajun's soul. The CEO went undercover expecting to find laziness. Instead, he uncovered a broken culture and chose not to punish it, but to heal it. That's what real leadership looks like. If you haven't already, subscribe to Moments of Quiet Truth, where we believe that the human spirit is never truly defeated, only waiting to rise.